Other plants prey upon animals and are equipped with mental faculties enabling them to efficiently capture their prey. We have typical illustrations of the adaptation of means to end in the case of the insect-eating plants previously referred to, but there are certain forms of plant life which trap and devour much large animals, which forms are found principally in tropical countries. Dunstan, the naturalist, reported finding on the banks of Lake Nicaragua a particular vicious plant of this class, which by the natives is called the devil's noose. This bush-like plant is equipped with long tendrils or whip-like feelers, flexible, strong, black, polished, and without leaves, which secrete a viscid fluid. These tendrils are employed by the plant to entangle small animals passing under its bush, and to then drain their blood and absorb their flesh. The naturalist one day passing along the banks of this lake was aroused by the shrieks and cries of his small dog. Pushing forward through the underbrush, he found the little animal tightly enmeshed in a number of these black, slimy, band-like tendrils which were cutting into its flesh by chafing and rubbing. The bleeding point had been reached in a number of places. He found that these bands were the tendrils or branches of this particularly carnivorous plant, which he described as virtually a land octopus. The natives of the tropics have weird legends of man-eating plants or trees of this kind, but so far science has not discovered an actual specimen of this kind, though it is admitted that the same is not beyond the bounds of possibility. Other plants have roots which capture and kill small burrowing animals like moles, and then slowly absorb the nourishment from their blood and flesh. The plant kingdom has its thugs and stranglers, as well as its vampires, according to the best authority. Professor Beiser says another plant showing irritability when touched, and possessing the faculty of finding and raising water by means of a long, slender, flat stem or tube, is a variety of orchid discovered by E.A. Supercrob of Philadelphia several years ago. This plant grows upon the trunks of trees hanging over swampy places along the bank of the Rio de la Plata and streams of the neighborhood. When this orchid is in want of water, the slender stem gradually unwinds until it dips into the water. Then the stem slowly coils around and winds up to discharge upon the part of the plant from which the roots spring the water which it has sucked up into its hollow space or tube within its interior. Sometimes, when water is absent from directly under this plant, the stem moves first in this direction and then in another in its search for water. And finally, finding the water, it performs the process above described. If this plant is touched while the stem is extended, it acts much like the sensitive plant mimosa, and the stem coils up into a spiral more rapidly than when it is lifting water. The experiments of this wizard of plant life, Luther Burbank, give us many illustrations of the manner in which the mind in the plant will respond to changed environment, and to take advantage of improved conditions thereof in the direction of adapting itself thereto. No one can study the works of modern botanists or work long among plants without discovering for himself many facts serving to prove that there is not only life among the plants, but also sufficient mind to serve the purposes and needs of the existence of the plant. Some scientists have thought it possible that by changing the environment of the plant sufficiently in the direction of calling out latent possibilities of mental action, it is probable that plants may be evolved, which would approach in their mental activity that of the lower forms of animal life, if not indeed exceed the latter. I want to mention something up here about Luther Burbank. I was reading one of Walter Russell's books, I think it was, and he's talking about Luther Burbank and how when he testified that when he was a child, he could hear Jesus talk to him. And he had walked through a potato field with his father, and one of the plants that was a bigger plant than the others, Jesus said, "Look at that plant. I want you to get that plant and grow it, and it will produce the best potatoes that can be had from this plant." Because that one that was extra strong, I guess, would produce more, just like it. But he was just a kid, and he couldn't really understand what he was supposed to do. But his father wouldn't let him go to the plant and just stand there the whole day. So he snuck out at night and went to that plant and went to sleep right beside that plant. And I guess they didn't go on in discussion about it, but I guess his father gave in and said, "Okay, we'll take this plant and you can study this plant." But he was just a little kid, and Jesus talked to him about that plant. Some may say it was Jesus. It could have been, if it was someone else, it might have been the Buddha talked to him. But we all have our Savior, like people who have guided all people throughout all ages. And sometimes it's Jesus, sometimes it's someone else. It's according to the individual. But plants, I believe, have intelligence. Oh, there's more to this. No one can study the works of modern botanists or work long among plants without discovering for himself. Oh, I have read that. The next will be the plane of the animals. Here once more, we discover that there is no fixed dividing line between the adjoining planes of consciousness. Just as the mineral consciousness is closely blended into the plant consciousness, as we have seen, so is the plant consciousness closely blended into the animal consciousness. In fact, in the lower forms of animal life, it is almost impossible at times to state positively whether the particular form under consideration is a plant or an animal. Forms which science formerly considered animal are not placed in the category of plant life, and other forms where science once held to belong to the plant kingdom are now placed in the category of animal life. The occultist recognizes that these disputed forms dwell in the region in which the two respective planes blend and intermingle, as has been stated before in these pages. Consciousness in animal life varies from the first faint glimmerings in the single-cell creatures in the slime of the ocean bed to the full dawn in the highest forms of animal life, like the horse, the dog, the elephant, etc. In each and every case, however, it will be found that each creature is endowed with a sufficient degree of intelligence to meet its needs and requirements, to adapt it to its environment. As the environment increases in complexity, the form of animal life has either adapted its consciousness to meet the requirements or else has perished in the course of evolution. Both science and the occult teachings inform us that animal life has its origin in the slime of the primeval ocean beds and took the form of the single-cell creatures. The best known form of single-cell animal is the monneuron, plural, monera, which is composed of but a single cell and is like a tiny drop of glue. It belongs to the lowest class of animal life, known as the protozoa. The monera lives in water and is a very minute, shapeless, colorless, slimy, sticky drop of protoplasmic substance. It has no organs of any kind, and all of its parts are similar. It lacks the separate organs or parts with which to perform the offices of the living creature as found in the higher forms of life. And yet, this organless creature performs the processes of like known. Performs the processes of like. I bet that meant that's supposed to be life. Performs the processes of life known respectively as nutrition, reproduction, sensation, and will action. Every part of the monera is capable of absorbing food and oxygen. It is all stomach and all lungs. Moreover, it is all reproductive organism. It envelops its prey by enclosing the latter in a drop of glue, as a drop of glue encloses a tiny gnat, and it then absorbs the nourishment from its food through every portion of its surface coming in contact with the food. It moves by prolonging a portion of itself outward like a tiny tail or finger. This constitutes the false foot by which it propels, pushes, or pulls itself forward or backward or sidewise. When it gets ready, it pulls back the false foot into its general substance and is the same as before. It has no distinction of sex, but reproduces itself by simply growing larger and then dividing itself into two, and the process is over, there being two monera where only one monera was the moment before. And yet this simple creature receives impressions from outside and responds thereto. It seeks its food and escapes its enemies. It has all the mind it needs. Next, in the rising scale of animal life, we find the amoeba. This creature also is a one-celled animal. It progresses by continuous projection of false feet and a subsequent drawing in of the same, which gives it the appearance of a many-fingered or many-footed thing. This creature has the beginning of parts and organs. In the first place, it has a nucleus at its center, and also an expanding and contracting cavity within itself, which it uses for holding, digesting, and distributing its food, a rudimentary stomach, so to speak. It also has something like a skin on its surface, and it cannot be turned inside out like its brother, the moneron, without disturbing its life. Let us pause here for a moment before passing on to the consideration of the higher forms of animal life. The purpose of the pause is to call your attention to the resemblance of the monera and the amoeba to the cells of which the human body is composed. The ordinary cells of the higher animal and mankind closely resemble the monera in many ways, while the white corpuscles of the blood of animals and men bear a striking resemblance to the amoeba, so far as is concerned their size, general structure, and movements. In fact, science classes them as amoeboids. The white corpuscles of our blood, these amoeboids, change their shape, take food in an intelligent manner, and live an apparently independent life with movements showing undoubted thought and will. The cells of which the bodies of animals and men are composed are really independent living creatures, each of which is possessed of sufficient mind to enable it to perform its necessary life work and offices. By means of the operation of what occultics know as the group mind, by which a number of independent cells coordinate their activities, these cells perform the coordinated work of the organism. Each of these cell minds manifests a perfect adaptation for its particular work. The work of these cells in extracting from the blood the exact amount of nourishment needed by it is but a minor evidence of the presence of such mind in them. The process of digestion, assimilation, etc., is another instance of the intelligence of the cells and cell groups. In the healing of wounds in which the cells rush to the points at which their service are needed, we have a striking instance of the selective intelligence of the cells. The cells of the body are constantly at work, performing the multitudinous offices of the organisms, working separately, in small groups and in great groups, according to the nature of the work to be done. Some of the cells of the body are active workers, manufacturing the secretions and fluids needed in the varied work of the system. Others belong to the reserves and are kept under waiting orders, awaiting the call to duty in the case of an accident or other emergency. Some are stationary, others remain stationary until they are called into motion to meet some requirement. Others are constantly moving about, some making regular trips, and others being rovers. Some of the moving cells perform the work of carriers. Some move from place to place doing odd jobs. Others perform scavenger work, and a large number are employed in the police force of the body, or else constitute the cell army. The carrier cells, the red corpuscles in the blood, travel in the arteries and veins, carrying a load of oxygen on the outward anterior arterial trip, and bringing back a return cargo of the waste products of the system to be burned up in the lungs. Other cells force their way through the walls of the arteries and veins and through the tissues of the body on repair work. The police cells and the soldier cells in the blood protect the system from the attacks of germs, bacteria, and other harmful visitors or invaders. One of the protecting cells coming in contact with an intruder of this kind will enmesh it and then proceed to devour it. If the task be too heavy for one cell, it will call the assistance of others, and the combined force will seize the intruder and try to eject it from the system. The work of the cells in repairing a wound furnishes one of the most striking illustrations of the presence of intelligence in the cells. When a portion of the body is wounded, it is found that the tissues, lymphatic and blood vessels, glands, muscles, nerves, and sometimes even the bone are severed. The alarm is sounded by the nervous system, and the repair cells rush to the spot in great numbers. The flowing blood washes away the dirt and foreign substance, or at least endeavors to do so. Then the blood coagulates and forms a scab to protect the wound. By this time, millions of blood cells have arrived on the scene, and the repair work begins at once. The cells display the most wonderful activity and intelligence in this work. The cells of the tissues, nerves, blood vessels, etc., on each side of the wound begin to reproduce themselves very rapidly and gradually form a bridge over the space between the two sides of the wound, bringing each side together. In this bridge work, they display intelligence, purpose, and system. The cells of the blood vessels connect with the same kind of cells on the opposite side of the wound, forming new tubes through which the blood may flow. The cells of the connective tissues do likewise, and so do the cells of each of the other kinds of bodily substance. Then, after the inside work is complete, new epidermis cells form a new skin over the healed wound. The above gives you but a passing glimpse of the wonderful, intelligent work of the cells in performing their offices in the body. What has not been told is equally as wonderful. To all intents and purposes, the cells of the body are like the individual bees in the hive, intelligent, independent, living creatures working together for the common good. The above digression was made in order to acquaint you with the wonderful intelligence which is possible of manifestation by the counterparts of the monera and the amoeba, those lowly forms of one-cell life which we have been considering on the preceding pages. An understanding of the facts above related will bring home to each student the full perception and appreciation of the truth of the statement previously made, that each living creature, from highest to lowest, is endowed with a degree of consciousness and intelligence proportionate to its requirements in its life work and activities. Some of the amoebas, the diatoms for instance, secrete solid matter from the water and build themselves tiny houses or shells to protect themselves from their enemies. These shells have tiny openings through which the creature may project its false feet for purposes of movement and for securing food. The skeletons of these minute creatures form the deposits of chalk found in many parts of the world. Next, higher in the scale come the infusora, but I will read that in the next one because I'm running out of time on this video. This is the Dove Lady. Over and out for now.